Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
And I mostly have my voice back this week, so you did not get a reverse introduction, even though I'm still losing my voice a little bit because I guess that's just what happens when I have visitors and I talk too much, which, is not surprising considering we have a podcast where we just talk too much. So it makes sense, right?
Totally makes sense.
Courtney and I are just coming off of a long weekend together, so that was super, super fun. We had a wonderful time, and I'm very sad that she is back home already. I told her to please just move in, but I guess, she just wants to live her own life and not live with me. I don't know, it's kind of weird. I don't really understand, but okay, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure Rosie and Dolly would be happy if I were there permanently.
Yes.
I think Dolly would be happy if Kevin was there permanently.
Yes, my dog Dolly is obsessed with Courtney's fiance. I mean, just absolutely adores him.
Same. But yes, I'm back home, and my cats made me pay for it last night. Not really Luna, but Nova, just at every hour scratching at something and being like, meow, meow. Until we got up and she was like, hi, I missed you. What you doing?
She's like, oh, remember when you left me for 4 days? Yep, I'm gonna make sure you remember that. Don't leave me again. I'm still here. Don't forget about me, please.
Yeah, and basically all the day while I was working, I had to hold her in my lap like a baby. And then Kevin had to also hold her when I wasn't working and he came up here. He had to hold her in his lap too because she's needy.
Is he having to hold her right now while you record, like Andrew's having to hold my human baby while we record?
I hope he's holding her because she loves to come and bang on the door when I'm recording. So hopefully she's down there in his lap.
Yes, my cat likes to wander back and forth in front of the door and meow at the top of his lungs until I let him in, which he has not done yet, and he usually does within the first 5 minutes of me coming in here. So we'll see if he joins us soon. And I'm sure you guys love hearing about all of our animals and all that fun stuff.
I'm sure you've heard Nova a few times. I know there's a few times they have been in episodes. So if you caught those or if you want to go catch them, you can go back and listen. But yeah, she'll make an appearance occasionally. She likes to just stick her paw under the door and shake it. So it just goes like thunk, 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 thunk. So normally we can cut those out, but the ever so often just meow out of nowhere gets left in.
You do the best you can when you record from home with subpar equipment,
And if you want to join our Patreon so we can get better equipment and put our cats, I don't know where. Maybe I'll leave. The cat shouldn't leave. Anyway. So we do have a few true crime. I think they're all true crime / death / whatever updates. News updates, I guess I could say. So, as you probably heard, Bill Cosby was released from prison on a technicality. I don't really know what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah.
It sounds like basically he did confess to drugging and raping women, but it was in a civil lawsuit type thing. But basically there was a deal where that should never... he shouldn't have gone to prison based on that testimony, and then it was used, which I'm like, how did y'all fuck up that one? This is...
Yeah.
Honestly, the Bill Cosby case was one of the biggest cases. A huge thing. I'm pretty sure it started along with Harvey Weinstein, the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
How did you fuck that one up, y'all? Anyway, so he is, I guess, currently out and about. And... his co-star, Felicia Rashad? You know what? Her last name doesn't matter after the tweet she sent about finally he's released and what a great injustice has been undone or whatever. So even though I wanted to try and be let's forget about Bill Cosby and remember the other actors of the Cosby Show, it's now there's two of them and it's ruined my childhood memories.
Yep, so we're just done with the Cosby Show now, because we should believe women, especially when you've already confessed, too. This is not even a he said, she said. You confessed to doing this multiple times. Just, what? Why are you standing by this man? I just do not understand.
Yeah, Bill Cosby was not like falsely, falsely accused. This is like cut and dry. Even if she wants to be like, I still love Bill Cosby, he's my best friend, whatever. Like, you are now a dean at a university where women might be coming to you being like, what do I do? This happened to me. And what are you going to, like, how many women could have possibly come to her? Like, because she worked with him and she was just like, doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and my SVU loving heart is super sad because Ice-T also tweeted some kind of support. Of course, he took it down immediately, but, screenshots are still there. You can't really remove anything from the internet. So that makes me very sad, and I'm like, seriously, like obviously you're an actor and it's a TV show, but you've also been in these storylines for this show about sexual assault for 20 years, and yet you still just don't give a shit, apparently. So... yeah. And, enough real quick. I don't know if they're going to do another trial for Bill Cosby just because he is so old and in poor health. They're probably like, this is just a waste of, time and resources. So.
And they already had 2 trials, I'm pretty sure. Because I think the first one was a mistrial. Something happened with the first one. And so it's like, who even knows? That's so sad. And those poor victims who are now having to, like, relive it and be like, wow, this is shitty.
Yeah, like I didn't get justice at all. Just so sad. In other trial, true crime, sexual assault news, Allison Mack from the NXIVM cult was sentenced to 3 years and a $20,000 fine for her role in recruiting and kind of
helping with the sexual assault and branding and everything else that cult basically did.
Yes, like she played a very large role in that. Keith Raniere was sentenced earlier this year to like 100-something years in prison, for being like the ringleader, and she was basically his like right-hand man. So interesting that she would only get 3 years and a $20,000 fine, but I'm sure her testimony against him played a big role in her sentencing decision as well.
Yeah, because she was just as responsible. I mean, she knew everything that was going on.
Yeah.
There was no denying that.
Absolutely.
And we're going to take a little turn on this next one. We're not going to talk about sexual assault or sex cults in this update. So as you guys know, I'm a huge hockey fan, and a really tragic thing happened in the hockey community this past weekend. It was the Columbus Blue Jackets goalie Matis Kivlenskis actually died due to like a firework malfunction. He was actually at the goaltending coach's house, and he was like with a bunch of people, and he was in the hot tub. And I don't know what exactly happened. They don't know if a firework itself hit him or from like the explosion of something. But basically it hit him in the chest, I'm pretty sure, and had so much damage that he did die. And he was like only 24. And he was so young and had like such a, life ahead of him. I mean, so young, had a whole career ahead of him. Kevin said he heard today they might be like investigating it just to be sure like nothing suspicious happened, which I'm sure they do with everything, just to be like, let's just make sure that nothing fishy happened here.
Yeah, I think anytime, especially with someone that young or such a like tragic accident, that you're like, okay, we just need to make sure this was really an accident.
Yeah, so if there's anything like suspicious that comes up with that, I'll let you guys know. I'm kind of doubtful. It sounds like it really was just a tragic accident. But yeah, just keep his family, his friends, all of them in your thoughts. Because that's just a really tragic situation. And I mean, I don't know where he's from, so I don't know when maybe he last saw his family either, because kind of sounds like a Norway, Finland name, maybe. Let me look it up. Hold on. I know, we're ranked there. I don't want to piss them off. So I just looked it up. He's from Latavia. I think that's how you pronounce it. It kind of touches around that area, so it wasn't too off. But yeah, so just super tragic for his family, his friends, the Columbus Blue Jackets Association, for hockey in general.
Yeah, definitely. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Darlie Routier. Our sources were good old Murderpedia, thefamouspeople.com, a CNN article, a Forensic Files Now article, the Red Handed podcast, which was episode 72. There's some information from the census website, a research paper called Quality Issues of Court Reporters and Transcriptionists for Qualitative Research by Monique Henning and Mary Beth Weber, and also a Reddit thread that we'll discuss at the end. So, a whole bunch of stuff going on this week.
Yes.
So, one night in 1996, two young boys were murdered in their home. The details of their murder and who killed them would be highly debated for years to come. So, Darlie Lynn Peck was born on January 4th, 1970, to Larry Peck and Darlie Key in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So, I guess she just named her daughter right after herself. I mean, men have juniors, why can't women? I don't know.
Exactly. Made it very confusing researching, though.
I'm sure it did. She had one sister named Danielle Fugate, and when she was a teenager, her family relocated to Lubbock, Texas, with her mother and stepfather, Robbie Key. Her mother found a job waitressing at a Western Sizzlin' restaurant where Darren Routier worked as a cook. He was 17, and Darlie, the younger Darlie, was 15 when they met. They did get married in 1988, which was also the same year that Darlie graduated from Monterey High School. So Darren started a company that tested electronic components, and it was really successful at first. So they bought a house in Rowlett, which is a suburb of Dallas, and they spent thousands of dollars renovating it. He also bought a 1982 Jaguar and a 30-foot cabin cruiser, while Darlie underwent a breast augmentation surgery in 1992 and also bought a lot of flashy jewelry. So they just got all kinds of money. They're just spending it, living life, doing their thing.
Which I think is like what they suggest is the number one rule of like what not to do when your business takes off suddenly. They're like,
yeah,
maybe let it be successful for a few years before you buy all of this. Like buy one of them. Get your boob job, but maybe hold off on the Jaguar.
Maybe put some of that money back into your business, so if the next year isn't as great, you can kind of sustain it. So
a savings account.
Yes, there's your free business tip from Jaclyn and Courtney, who know nothing about running a business. You're welcome. Hope it works. So the couple also had 3 children. Devon Rush was born on June 14th, 1989. Damon Christian was born on February 19th, 1991. And Drake was born on October 18th, 1995. So several children right there in a few years together. All boys.
All with a first name starting with a D.
Yes, as well as both of their parents.
Family thing. Yeah.
So the Routiers were definitely living outside their means, like we hinted at. But a lot of people who knew them didn't really know that. They really just seemed to be like this picture-perfect family. Darlie would bake cookies for the neighbors, and she even helped out a cancer patient with paying their mortgage. So they are giving back to the community. Nobody really knows that they're like spending money that maybe they don't have. So soon their business did start to lose money. Like we said, that may happen. They applied for a loan, but they were rejected because of how bad their financial situation was. They were behind on their mortgage. They owed $10,000 in back taxes, and they had about $12,000 of credit card debt. So they're like, we're not going to give you a loan. You guys got too much going on as it is.
Yeah. They're like, you're not going to pay this back.
Yeah. So Darren and Darlie were also having marital issues at this time, and at one point Darlie was even contemplating suicide and had written a note in her diary for her children asking them for their forgiveness and telling them not to blame themselves for her death. So she was like seriously considering it at one point. On June 6, 1996, Darlie fell asleep on the couch downstairs with 2 of her sons, Devon and Damon. Drake was only 7 months old at the time and was upstairs with Darren, who has a lot of D's. Okay.
Yep. It's like they're all like DN or like, like DE, like names that are very, very similar.
Yes, very similar names. So Darren was woken up to the sound of Darlie screaming and glass breaking. So he ran downstairs and he saw blood everywhere, and Darlie was screaming about a man in their house. So at 2:31 a.m., 911 dispatchers got an emergency call from Darlie from their home at 5801 Eagle Drive in Rowlett, Texas. Darlie said that an intruder had broken into the house and stabbed 2 of her sons and attacked her as well. Darren had been sleeping upstairs with Drake, like we said, as Darlie slept downstairs with Damon and Devon. The first officer to the scene, David Waddle. Come on, David. Really? You couldn't have a different name? So this officer saw Darren running out of the home. So Waddell stopped him to question him and to see how he was. Darren told him that he was going across the street to get his neighbor, Karen Neal, because she was a nurse. So Waddell let him go and try to find her and just, go do your thing, I guess, even though this crazy thing just happened in your home, but okay. And Waddell walked in to find Darlie still talking to the dispatchers with one of her sons already dead and the other one pretty close to being dead as well. And there was also a cut screen at the home that he found. So Darren returned to the house and started CPR at the instruction of Waddell. However, it was too late. Darlie also had injuries, including knife wounds to her arms and a knife cut to the throat. So she asked Waddell if any of her jewelry was stolen. So maybe she was just in shock, and sometimes people say weird things in shock, but, kind of an odd thing to say at that time.
Yeah.
So when backup arrived, Waddell searched the house, but he didn't find any intruder. Darlie also told him at this time that she had touched the knife that had been used. So just another little red flag. She was taken to Baylor University Medical Center in downtown Dallas to be treated for her injuries. And actually, a necklace that she was wearing saved her life, and they had to surgically remove it. So basically, the necklace had stopped the knife less than 2 millimeters away from her carotid artery and actually nicked it just a little bit. So if she had not been wearing that necklace, she would not have survived. So she did have to have surgery, and 2 days later, the detectives interviewed her. She told them again how she had fallen asleep on the couch with her boys and woken up in the middle of the night to a man standing over her. He attacked her and she fought with him, but she couldn't remember anything about his face. She just knew that it had been a white man. So the investigation was a little bit too much for the Rowlett Police Department because they had only ever handled one multiple murder before. So they did request the help of retired Dallas detective James Cron. So Cron was convinced that someone in the family had killed these boys. On the island in the kitchen, there was a lot of jewelry, including watches, rings, some other stuff, and it was all still there, so it doesn't really seem like a burglary. And Darlie had also told the police that the assailant had dropped the knife in the utility room when he was leaving, and that's where she picked it up. So there wasn't really any evidence that the knife had been dropped, but it actually looked like it had been laid on the carpet, then the sideboard, and also the table in the living room because there were blood throughout the home where the knife had been placed. Something else that was suspicious in Cron's mind was that Darren supposedly heard glass smashing when he was woken up by Darlie screaming. So there was glass from broken wine glasses in the kitchen on the floor, but the glass was on top of her bloody footprints, so it looked like she had been walking around with bloody feet before the glass had broken. So with all of these things adding up, Cron believed that Darlie was not telling the truth. So after Darlie was released from the hospital, police took Darren and Darlie to be interviewed separately. And in this interview, Darlie's story does change a little bit. She now said that Damon had woken her up screaming, "Mommy, Mommy," and when she opened her eyes, she saw a man in the doorway heading from the kitchen to the utility room. She followed him, and this is when he attacked her. So her story does change from being woken up to an intruder to waking up when the intruder is leaving. So it's kind of a big thing to change in your story. Sometimes with shock and, trauma and everything, things get confused, but that is kind of a big thing.
And it'd be kind of weird that, an intruder would come in and kill your 2 sons, but leave you sleeping there.
Yeah.
Or that you wouldn't hear any of that, So it's a little odd.
Yeah. So 8 days after the incident, Darlie was shown on newscasts across the country at her son's graves celebrating Devon's birthday, who would have turned 7 that year. She's seen smiling, laughing, and spraying silly string on the graves while singing happy birthday with the rest of her family. So it wasn't just her. Darren was there, Darren's whole family, everyone is there participating in this celebration of what would have been his birthday. They're all laughing, trying to have a good time, but this did have a huge effect on the public's opinion of Darlie. She would be charged with capital murder 4 days later, and this video would play a huge part in her trial. So no one really, understands or can judge how someone else grieves, but the video is kind of odd. And her family, but her family did defend her, saying that the newscast didn't show the really solemn ceremony that they had beforehand honoring the children. So they're like, this was after we had already had this super serious ceremony, and we just wanted to laugh and have fun and celebrate, our sons. And again, looking at it in hindsight, it can seem very odd with the circumstances, but the rest of her family were there doing the same thing as well. And they're like, no, this was not, this was normal.
Yeah, because that's the thing, too, is, the news stations just showed, this 1-minute clip of Darlie just laughing and spraying silly string, and they're like, how can a mother who just lost her son be doing this? But it's but you're not looking at this huge, celebration of life and a ceremony and everything that led up to it. It's not like you just went there and was like, silly string, let's go, party. So news stations did call her the Dallas Susan Smith. So if you remember, we did cover Susan Smith a few months ago, and she had killed her children, but she claimed to have been carjacked. However, Darlie's family did stand by her and defend her. Her mother and Darren both went on radio shows standing up for her, but there was a gag order, and now Darren and Darlie's mother were subpoenaed, and baby Drake was put into temporary foster care. So, realizing Darlie was in for a big trial, her family hired Douglas Mudler, who was supposed to be a legendary Dallas attorney, but it was going to cost them $250,000.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for an attorney.
Yes, especially in the late 90s.
Yeah. Because, that'd still be probably a pretty big jump.
Yeah.
So they did sell everything to just be able to afford him, because they were like, this is her only shot at getting a semi-fair trial. So the prosecution were only charging her with the death of Damon. Since he was under 6 years old, it would be capital murder and the death penalty. So they're like, okay, just do this one. We can just get her with it. And it seems the prosecution was not charging her in the murder of Devon. In case she did get off on this one, they wouldn't have to worry about double jeopardy. So if somehow a jury found her not guilty with Damon, they could go after her for Devon.
Yeah.
Also, due to the publicity of this case, they moved the trial from Dallas to Kerrville, which is about 4.5 hours away. It is a very small and very conservative town. At the 2000 census, only about 20,000 people lived there, so pretty small town. And the prosecution actually pushed for this move, which is kind of weird, since usually we hear the defense pushing. And clearly the Dallas media was on the side that Darlie was guilty. So it's how is this not going to help you? The prosecution's really going to help you. So on the Red Handed podcast, they did say apparently Kerrville has a reputation for finding people guilty of murder. And they said that Douglas Mudler even joked that if he was murdered, have his murder tried in Kerr County because they'll find him guilty.
Well then.
So that's how notorious this county is. Even her defense attorney knows it.
Yeah.
Which makes you think, why would he go along with this move if it was clearly in the favor of the prosecution? You're getting paid a lot of money. Shouldn't you kind of fight that one?
Yeah, that doesn't make much sense.
Either way, on January 6, 1997, the trial did begin. And all of Darlie's family was banned from the trial. They were not allowed to be in the room at all. The prosecution portrayed Darlie as a spoiled, materialistic woman who could not cope with the overwhelming debt and the loss of her rich lifestyle, and that she murdered her children due to their financial difficulties. And the prosecution said the whole crime scene had been staged, and the retired Dallas cop, James Cron, came in to testify to support this, being like, I can show you all these different places that it's clearly staged. And he also testified that he believed that the murder weapon had been moved around the house multiple times, like we talked about earlier. And so he also says, this is obvious that Darlie was staging. It could be an attack that took a while, but also it kind of sounds like, wouldn't Darren have woken up at that time? So the jurors were also shown that infamous silly string video, and that really made a big impact on them. which you would expect if you're just shown that video.
Yeah.
So the prosecution also brought up how the valuable jewelry was left untouched, which indicated to them it was someone in the house, because nothing in the house was touched at all. So it's like, if an intruder came in, they came in, killed 2 people, tried to kill Darlie, and just left, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, is not very common.
And, like, from what I've heard, too, like, robberies and burglaries typically don't happen at night because they know people are home. Like, they try to do it during the day when, like, they know people are at work and the house is empty, because if you're trying to steal stuff, you usually aren't trying to kill people if that's your primary motive. Like, you don't want to get caught.
Like, sometimes you end up killing someone during it because there's a witness, but you try to avoid there being a witness. So, yeah, you usually wouldn't do it at night. But that does also make me want to look up robbery statistics for the past year when so many people were working from home. I wonder if they decreased.
I feel like it would have had to have dropped.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
Especially during that stretch when, like, it was like you have to, like, unless you're essential, like, you have to. So the prosecution also called Dr. Janice Townsend, who's a Dallas County medical examiner who had completed Damon's autopsy. And she also testified about Darlie's wounds and said they seemed superficial, which is a little weird because, I mean, it did nick her carotid artery. It seems not so superficial.
Yeah, it seems like a very close call if that was what she's implying.
And another witness, Greg Davis, also tried to hint that there were hesitation marks. So Dr. Townsend agreed that there could be. However, under cross-examination, she agreed that most of the hesitation marks she had seen before were not that deep. So kind of saying both things. And then they started talking about the bruising. So Dr. Townsend had gone to the hospital the day of the attacks to see Darlie. And she did not see any signs of, like, marks or bruisings that she would consider, like, consistent with blunt force trauma in an attack. So the prosecution really made a big deal about this, and they're like, okay, there's no bruising. There's nothing on her. So clearly she's not, like, fighting back like she said. But when questioned by Mudler, Dr. Townsend again said that if you have broken blood vessels and deeper sutures, like if you've sustained a more severe injury, bruises are unlikely to show up within 24 hours. So it's like, if she showed up, you know, within that 24 hours, you might not see it. So Dr. Townsend here is kind of talking, like, out of both sides, I feel like. Not to, like, critique her or anything, but...
Yeah.
So she had to admit that even though she didn't see any bruises, they could have developed later. And in pictures taken by police on June 10th, which was 4 days later, she had massive bruising on her arms from under her armpit all the way down to her wrist. And the bruising was also, like, basically black. Like, it was very intense bruising. So this is where the courtroom kind of turns into a little bit of a circus. So the prosecution now forms a conspiracy theory that since they didn't see the bruises on the days before the 10th, that Darlie realized police were suspicious of her, so she had someone beat up her arms to fit with her story. So, I mean, could this have happened? Sure, but you don't have any evidence of that. You're just pulling this out of your ass.
So, like, how can we make this fit?
So this is kind of a tough one. So it does seem like if she had these very deep bruises that took a few days to appear, she would have had some, like, soreness, swelling, or redness on her arms that very first day, and they didn't see any of that. And they did have a nurse come testify who was there when Darlie came in, who cleaned her and cleaned the blood off of her, and Darlie never complained that her arms hurt. But this is also right after. You have adrenaline, you have shock. Also, was she given painkillers because she has, like, a literal gash to her neck? So, you know, it's happened before when you, like, stub your toe, and then if you broke your foot at the same time, you're probably not going to feel your stub toe. So maybe this happened, maybe not. You're going to see in the case, this is everything. Maybe, maybe not. So there was no redness. So that is kind of odd that there was, like, no sign of anything until these pictures 4 days later. It's just really not the damning evidence I think the prosecution wants it to be. However, Dr. Townsend continues to testify and talk more about Darlie's wounds, especially her defensive wounds. So she said most defensive wounds usually are seen on the hands or forearms, and they're usually very deep on the fingers and palms, and they can cut through tissues and even cut through like tendons down to the bone because people want to grab the knife. So if someone's coming at you with a knife, you're going to try to grab it because my hand's going to hurt, but it's better than someone stabbing me.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. And Darlie had none of these injuries. So she had a slash across her neck, a slash across her shoulder, and a slash across her right forearm. And she had that bruising that showed up a few days later. But besides that, she didn't really have any other like defensive wounds that you would expect to see. And even if you didn't see them on her hands, you'd expect to see them on her forearms. If it's a natural instinct to like raise your arms to protect your face. I did this when I got into a car accident. When the airbag went off, I raised my hand up to protect my face. Didn't know I did it. Fucked up my wrist. Better than fucking up my face, I guess. But so if even, in that, I'm raising it up, you would think if someone's coming at you with a knife to your neck, you'd have a slash on your forearm too.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that you would just like sit there and not do something to try to protect your face, head region. It's kind of a...
Yeah, it's like a natural instinct.
Evolutionary instinct, yeah.
So, Cerruti from Red Handed brings up an excellent point, though, that if she was holding her children, she might not have these injuries on her hands because she's holding them. So she's like holding her children, trying to protect them.
Yeah.
And maybe she just couldn't bring herself to drop her children.
Or like maybe she's covering like their faces. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be directly up
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was covered in their blood, so that could be why, like, those injuries, like, weren't present. In her second story, she did say she was woke up as the man was leaving, so maybe, like, he wasn't trying to kill her, he just kind of slashed her to get away.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make great sense, but, I mean, it could happen if her second story is accurate, and he's like, well, I don't want to kill you, I'm just trying to run away.
Mm-hmm.
But also that story doesn't really make sense.
I think we'll get into it a little bit later, but, why would someone come into your home just to kill 2 children? What is the motive in that? But we will talk about that later. But one piece of evidence that was presented that really doesn't look good for Darlie, it was the blood in the sink. So one forensic analyst said that there was blood on the sink, the taps, the handles on the cabinets under the sink, and inside the cabinets. So, like in most people's houses, she did keep her cleaning supplies under the sink, so it seems possible that someone was trying to clean up at the scene. And the testing they did appear to show that it was fresh blood all over. So, not like, oh, this was from, 2 weeks ago when my kid cut his foot playing outside or whatever.
And this case is compared a lot to the Julie Ray Harper case, which we'll also get into more later. And as you remember, they were like digging up her septic tank trying to find evidence of blood, and there was none, but there is in this house, so it's like it is kind of suspicious.
Mm-hmm. So Douglas Mulder argued that Darlie had no motive to murder her children. He also pointed out that the prosecution had no motive, confession, or any witnesses. And despite her attorney's warnings, she did testify on the stand, but really just withered under the cross-examination. Mulder also brought up the cut screen in the garage and said that this is how the intruder got in. So if you remember hearing this case from the media, they reported that the screen was cut from the inside, but this was actually wrong. Testing did show that the screen had been cut from the outside of the house. So the prosecution does bring up that it seems kind of pointless to cut the screen at all because it can just be moved. So if you could just move it out of the way, why would you cut it to enter the home? That doesn't really make sense. And the prosecution also says that it's obvious that this was a staged scene because a bread knife found in the kitchen was used to cut the screen, and it was not the murder weapon that was used to cut the screen. So a different knife from inside the home. They said that they had forensics to back it up because they had tested the bread knife and fibers on it did match fibers from the screen, so clearly this was staged, according to the prosecution. So Mulder did use the 911 call as a key part of his argument. So he did play it for the jury, and she sounds really hysterical and upset. We are going to put the call in here.
I need you to talk to me.
And she does also mention here that she had already touched the knife, so interesting.
It's kind of a weird thing if you're calling being like, my children are murdered. By the way, I touched the murder weapon. Which also sounds like something I would say, though, because if I accidentally did that, I'm listening to so much true crime, I'd be like, I'm so sorry, I fucked up the scene.
Yeah, that is a good point. So San Antonio Chief Medical Examiner Vincent DeMaio testified about Darlie's injuries and how close the injury was to her carotid artery, like we said. He said her injuries did not match self-inflicted wounds that he had seen. The physicians who treated her at Baylor University Medical Center testified differently, and they said that they could have been self-inflicted. So Red Handed does discuss on their episode about whether or not it would be easy or hard to accidentally hit the carotid artery. So it can be at closer at different points in your throat, but it does seem that where it hit her, it should have been, where the knife hit her should have been protected by her windpipe. So it's like your carotid can be in a different spot, but it didn't seem likely that they would have been aiming for it, or that she would have been aiming for it.
And usually when you see self-inflicted wounds, they're very surface level. And so to go deep enough that you would have to go almost under your windpipe, it's that is a pretty deep self-inflicted cut.
Yeah. And you would have to have a lot of willpower to stab your neck that deeply in that moment.
Yeah.
Jurors did not get to see pictures of her injuries, which we feel probably should have been shown, because I feel that's a pretty strong argument that she did not do it to herself, because it is a brutal injury. So, them not being able to see what it actually looked like did not help her case at all.
Because I've seen the picture and it's rough.
Yeah. So Tom Bevel, who was an expert in blood spatter analysis, testified that the cast-off blood on the back of her nightshirt suggested that she had drawn her hand back every time before stabbing her children repeatedly. But again, like we've said in many, many episodes, we know how unreliable blood spatter analysis is.
She was covered in their blood. I mean, that blood probably could have gotten there by 40 different ways.
Exactly. I don't even know if they can still use blood spatter analysis in trials today. It seems like it's been proven unreliable so much.
I think it's so unreliable too because so many blood spatter analysts go in to try and make it work. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, 100%.
Where they're oh, you were stabbed like this and this. Let me do it 20 times instead of being I did it once or 3 times to get an average. This is what I come up with. They're let's keep doing it until we can do it, which is a huge thing in the Staircase documentary. If you guys have watched that, of they had video of the blood spatter analyst cheering when they finally got it to work. And it's that's not science.
No. And as a blood spatter analyst, you should not be going in with a theory of what happened. You should go in with no prior knowledge of what is this, what am I looking at, who are the key players here. You shouldn't know any of that because that's going to alter your judgment. You should go in with here is the blood, you tell me what happened. Can you? Yeah. Probably not, which is just proof that blood spatter analysis is bullshit. So
yeah.
So now the jury was asked to go and deliberate, and apparently during their deliberations they watched the Silly String video 9 times. So clearly this was something that was weighing heavily on their minds on their decision. The jury did end up finding Darlie Routier guilty after only 8 hours of deliberation, and she was sentenced to death by lethal injection on February 4th, 1997. She has been held at the Mountain View unit in Texas for the last 20 years. There was a video of her walking onto death row in a white gown because she was a suicide risk, and a lot of the reporters are just shouting questions at her, and she just kept repeating, "I didn't kill my children." So J. Stephen Cooper was appointed as Darlie's post-conviction attorney. He claimed that there had been many errors made by the defense during her trial. There were also some errors in the trial transcript. So court reporter Sandra Halsey made more than 30,000 mistakes in the transcript, and 40 to 50% of these were substantial errors. There were some places with missing words, phrases, or she just written inaudible speech, so she didn't catch what they said and just left that blank. So the research on quality issues in court reporting from the paper that we mentioned in our resources, they studied to see how many errors there were on average in court transcripts, and it was around 1,000 to 2,000 mistakes. So, this isn't like a definite number or anything, but if you compare the two, Darlie's clearly had a much higher number of mistakes.
If the average is 1 to 2,000 and hers is 30,000,
yeah,
that's a lot.
Which, the 1 to 2,000 sounds like a lot, but if you think about the fact that you should be literally writing every single word said of this entire trial, I mean, you're going to have some mistakes. So, for 1 to 2,000... I don't know
if they were maybe, just omitting, one little word or maybe misspelling a word or something. You know what I mean? All that. But, so you would definitely expect mistakes, but not to this extent of mistakes.
Yes, absolutely. And Cooper also said that in his 25 years, he had never seen anything like this. So without the proper transcript, he couldn't really accurately form an appeal. So he's like, well, this should be enough to get her a new trial. And many experts also agreed that this should have been enough. The court is responsible for this error, so you would think that they would be able to do a mistrial or a retrial, because clearly it's their fault that he can't even put together an argument for an appeal because he doesn't have an accurate transcript. And part of the death penalty is getting reviews of your trial. So if they can't even get the transcript, how are they going to properly give her a review of her trial for receiving the death penalty? That doesn't make any sense. And when the court reporter who worked Darlie's trial, Sandra Halsey, was questioned, she did plead the fifth. So she's like, whoops. And the state did offer to drop the death penalty against Darlie and change it to life in prison if she dropped the appeal, agreed to never appeal again, and admitted to killing her children, which she refused because she's maintained her innocence this whole time.
And talk about the court knowing they messed up.
Right?
Being like, we'll drop the death penalty, which is the whole, basis of this case, the whole reason we did what we did in this case. And if we'll just drop it all if you do this,
Yeah. Yeah. So Cooper did file a petition for a new trial, but it was denied, and Sandra Halsey was decertified as a court reporter. So since the petition for a new trial was denied, Cooper decided to file an appeal. So in Texas, you get 3 appeals, and you must have a reason to file. So you can't just say, I want to appeal it just because. You have to have it backed up by some reasonable reason. Cooper said that there wasn't enough evidence for the jury to actually convict without reasonable doubt, and that Darlie had ineffective counsel during her trial. He said that he came across game-changing evidence that the jury did not see. They did not see the 2-hour memorial that occurred before the silly string video. Again, they watched that video 9 times, but they never saw the memorial that occurred before that. Cooper also found out that Darlie's sister was the one who brought the silly string to the memorial. She said that she did that because her nephew just really loved silly string, it was something that was special to him. So how did Mudler not call the sister to the witness stand during the trial? You would think that that would be something that he would find and bring up. And why did he also not show the memorial? Mudler also knew the video existed of the memorial, but never showed it. And the prosecution had actually given it to him, and he chose not to use it at her trial.
Yeah, because the prosecution was like, okay, he'll use this. And then he never did. You're paying this man $250,000. You sold basically all your belongings. And he didn't even because the silly string video, if you think about the fact, if they say there was a 2-hour memorial and she didn't even bring the silly string, that makes it even less damning.
Absolutely.
There was also other evidence Mudler did not use. So in pictures from the crime scene, you could see major bits of evidence had been moved around the room while the pictures were being taken. So in one picture, you can see the bloody knife is in one place, and then in another picture, the knife is in another place. So...
Oh, okay.
You remember how we saw the blood spatter and the knife being moved around? It might not have been Darlie at all.
Yeah.
So, and this could explain, why the police found those smudges all over the place. And this is good reasonable doubt. If you're saying there's no way you can say for sure that Darlie moved it around everywhere, like, that's reasonable doubt. A major point. So, also a major point for the prosecution was saying that she staged it and moved the knife, but these pictures were proving that, like, it was the police that moved it, and, like, they had photo evidence. Like, it wasn't just a conspiracy theory. It was like, here's proof.
Here's proof that it was moved during this investigation, yeah.
Yeah. Which you're not supposed to do as a crime scene investigator. You don't touch anything. You leave it where it is.
Man, we're just giving all kinds of good tips in today's episode.
We're being armchair experts over here.
Yes, definitely. I like it.
They also did not see the extensive injuries and bruising, which would have cast the doubt to them being self-inflicted. So, you know, as we were saying, like, they didn't bring up, like, the cut, like, they didn't see the cut on her neck. And Mudler didn't bring up how odd it was because Darlie's cut to the throat indicated that she would have had to cut herself with her left hand, but Darlie is right-handed. So why, if you're trying to make yourself look like you have a self-inflicted wound, would you do it with your non-dominant hand?
I mean, I am right-handed, and I can't even brush my teeth with my left hand, so I feel like if I was going to slash my throat and make it look like someone else did it, but need to avoid my carotid artery, I'm probably going to use my dominant hand for that.
Yeah, like if you're like, okay, I need to make a cut just enough to make it look realistic. Why would you do it with your left hand?
Yeah.
And even if you were like, okay, I'm going to kill my 2 kids and then kill myself, why would you do it with your left hand?
Yeah.
Because, like, you also probably wouldn't be as strong with your left hand as your right hand because you use your right hand for more things. Like, again, more reasonable doubt that was not brought up.
Yeah.
Jurors from this trial who were later interviewed said if they had seen the pictures of her injuries, they may have found her not guilty.
Wow.
So just the pictures alone, seeing that, would have swayed their decision. Mm-hmm. Cooper also added that it was interesting that Darren was not investigated more. So he was in the house, and he was seen leaving the house also, which I think I'll get into that in a minute. But and he had also previously admitted to an insurance scam. So he had previously had his Jaguar stolen so that he could file a claim on it. And he had talked about a plan to stage a home robbery to collect on the insurance claim. And Darlie said she had no knowledge of this plan that Darren was creating. Like, she had no idea that he wanted to stage this whole thing to try and get money.
Interesting.
So Darren would have also collected on Darlie's $250,000 life insurance policy if she had died. And apparently Devon and Damon also had life insurance policies as well. Only about $5,000 each, but if you're in major debt, $10,000 goes a long way. That would be a pretty big gain if you think about it. And, like, you know, like, if you are a defense attorney, you're going to try to find someone else who could have done it. So how was Darren not looked at? I know it sucks to, like, throw your husband under the bus, but, like, throw your fucking husband under the bus.
That's the whole point of the reasonable doubt.
Like, tell him, like, honey, I'm sorry, I don't think you did it, but we got to throw you under the bus here. Take one for the team. So Darren obviously denied involvement in the murders. He had also taken a polygraph test and failed, like severely badly failed. Again, not reliable, not admissible in court, did just lose his sons, all that. So Darlie basically had no motive for killing her sons, but Darren would get at least $250,000 from this murder. So again, we're not trying to say Darren did it, but this is a part of the defense's job to find reasonable doubt. And an alternative suspect who could reasonably do it is like the best thing of reasonable doubt you could get. So why not even try to bring it up?
But I'm sure also that Darlie was a beneficiary on her son's life insurance policy, right? So, I mean, she would at least get like the $10,000, which, you know, so they may not have wanted to bring that part up because then it could also be used against Darlie, but you could at least bring up like her life insurance policy. Yeah,
because that's the thing too, is it's like, okay, if you kill them, you get maybe like $10,000, but like Darren should want to kill Darlie if he's trying to get like the financial motive for Darlie's death is a lot more than the 2 sons. Mm-hmm. So there's another huge reveal coming when looking at this appeal. So the prosecution had said how the fibers from the bread knife in the kitchen matched the fibers from the cut screen in the garage. Well, apparently they hadn't actually tested the fibers found on the knife against the screen to be able to really pin it down. So they didn't do that. So the prosecution hadn't been able to rule out other material in the house. So the fibers were consistent, but they weren't a definitive match. They could match, but they could also match to other things in the house that you might have used the bread knife on. So all the defense would have had to show is that it could match to literally anything else in the house, but Mudler didn't even try. If this is such a big thing for the prosecution, why don't you even try to bring this up when you're getting paid all this money?
Yeah.
Cooper, however, did. He tested 7 fingerprint brushes that investigators had used while examining the house, and 4 of them came back as a match to what was on the bread knife. So there, you could have just said, okay, it could match the screen, but it could also match these little fingerprint brushes that the cops are using, and that's how it ended up when they tested it. Imagine if any of this had been brought up in trial. Jurors said, if we just saw pictures, we'd be convinced, and now you have all of this reasonable doubt. So, despite all of this, which I feel would be enough for an appeal, she's been denied twice of her appeals. And she had only 1 left. So, 3 fingerprints had been found at the house that they have not been able to, accurately match to anyone in the family. Cron believed that these prints could just be from the boys. However, the investigators failed to take fingerprints from the boys before they were, buried, so they couldn't, test that theory. He was they were just the boys' fingerprints. We're not going to, in this autopsy, take their fingerprints.
Right. You would think that would be something that you would do, especially knowing the circumstances of their murder and the investigation. You think you would do that, maybe.
Because as the prosecution, you want an airtight case. You don't want any doubt at all. So, why not do it just to, prove it? So, they had exhumed the boys to try and get these fingerprints, but the boys had actually been buried holding hands, which broke my heart, just that visual, that thought. And the vault had also cracked, so water had gotten in, so basically it destroyed any chance of getting these fingerprints. But when the fingerprints were examined, it did seem more likely they'd come from an adult. They were both really young, so I guess the finger just looked like it should be bigger from someone who would be an adult and not a child.
It's probably the damn crime scene text with how efficient or how...
Right?
What's what I'm looking for?
Incompetent?
With how competent they are in their jobs. I'm sure it was, maybe them.
And experts do kind of go back and forth on whose these were. No one can really agree on whose they might have been. But once Cooper got a hold of it, he had found 3 fingerprint experts who would say they exclude Darlie as a source for these prints. So these prints could be Darlie's last chance to win an appeal. In 2008, she received the rights to new testing. So the court ruled that the fingerprints should be tested with the most current testing available, including DNA testing. So if there's any indication that this DNA belongs to a male not in the Routier family, then this could prove Darlie's innocence. But this had to be put on hold until December 2018. Don't know why it's been on hold for 10 years. And I can't really find any evidence that it's been completed, which just kind of shows how our justice system is. Oh yeah, you can get this new testing. It'll just take until you're dead.
Yeah.
And on January 19th, 2014, both prosecution and defense were given permission to perform further DNA tests on a smudged fingerprint found in the house, a bloody sock found outside, and her nightshirt. So this bloody sock mentioned was found in an alley 75 yards away from the home.
Wow.
And blood on this sock was said to be from both boys. So Cron believes this was planted by Darlie to help her, where she could point and be look, it wasn't me, there's this sock 75 yards away. But a lot of people believe there's just no possible way that Darlie would have had time to stab the boys, call 911, cut the screen in her home, run the sock down to the alley, inflict the wounds on herself, because remember, Darlie was still like on the 911 call when an officer showed up, and the call in total was only 5 minutes and 44 seconds. But Damon, who was still alive when the police got there, according to experts, could have only lived for about 8 or 9 minutes given his injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying she did all of this in like 9 minutes?
That's while still on the phone with police.
Yeah. I mean, she could have maybe planted some of this from before. Like, maybe, like, oh, here, like, oops, you accidentally cut your finger. Let's put blood on it and place it later. But that's a lot.
That is a lot, yeah.
But they can really only wait for the DNA testing to come back. So prosecution said none of the DNA had been, like, unidentified, but not all of the DNA was tested. So, kind of confusing. And it's been 20 years, so it's hard to say if anything will come back. Really just depends, like, how well did you, like, store this sock. So after Darlie's trial, Darren actually lost custody of their remaining son, Drake, because of his support for Darlie. So Darren's parents were eventually given full custody, and he was allowed visitation rights. But he later was allowed to have Drake move back in with him, and Darren and Darlie did divorce in September 2011, and he has since remarried, and he lives in Lubbock, Texas. So Darlie does maintain her innocence and has never changed her story. I don't know if she was guilty, if she would admit it. And her remaining son, Drake, believes that Darlie is innocent, and he does visit her regularly. In 2013, Drake actually found out that he had acute lymphomic leukemia, which is the most common type of cancer in children and has a pretty good rate of cure. And on October 13, 2016, Drake did finish his last cancer treatment. And in June 2018, he was reported to be in remission. So that is really rough for if Darlie didn't do it, if Darren didn't do it, that your remaining child does get childhood cancer. Like, what are your odds?
Gosh. I'm glad to hear he's doing well as of 2018.
Yeah. So, did Darlie do it? Did Darren do it? Was it a random stranger? So, we did find a Reddit thread trying to say that it could be Tommy Linsells. So, if you remember, in the Julie Ray Harper case, Tommy Linsells said, yeah, I, killed Joel. There's really no evidence, but he did frequent Texas, so a lot of his killings did happen in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody in that Reddit thread said it couldn't be him because he was in jail. They did not cite a source, so I don't really necessarily believe that, because you can say anything you want on the internet.
But it is very similar to the Julie Ray Harper case and his other cases of this random breaking into a house just to kill a child and then leaving. So, we talk about through this whole case that it is very unusual for that to happen, but it could happen.
Yeah. And, this is a man who has been shown to, break in and just try to kill children. So it could be possible that he killed them and then just swiped at her when he was trying to get away.
Mm-hmm.
So whether Darlie did it or not, this investigation was pretty biased. It seemed they were trying harder to find evidence that Darlie did it rather than investigate what happened. Again, kind of like the Julie Ray Harper case. Different states, we're seeing how this happens where they go in and be like, this is what we want to happen. Let's make it work.
Yeah.
I don't think this is as clear cuts as Diane Downs or Susan Smith. Those were pretty clear cut. I do think it's possible she did it, but in the trial, I don't know if she should have been found guilty. I think there was reasonable doubt, and if she'd had a proper defense, she might have been found not guilty. So this is kind of a tough one, because it's did she do it? Didn't she do it? That's a tough one.
Yeah, it really, so much of the evidence could really go either way, but again, that's one of those cases where it's she should have been found not guilty because there's so much uncertainty there. So it's whether or not you believe she actually did it, in the case of a trial, there was enough reasonable doubt to say that maybe she didn't. And that's really all you need to be acquitted, is that reasonable doubt.
And I mean, statistically, it is most likely that her or Darren did it, because I do think it's weird that, the cop showed up and saw, he knows the call is that an intruder was in the home, like attacking them, and he sees a man running from the house, and the guy goes, "Oh, I'm this person, just going to get my nurse neighbor," and he's like, "Cool, go."
Yeah,
Because it's like,
very, very weird.
did you personally like know Darren and know who he was, or were you just like, okay, I'll take your word for it when you see a man running from the home, a white man running from, like, weird.
I mean, they did say that it was a small town, so it is possible that he did know him. But even if you knew him, it's still weird that you would, like, allow him to just run away from the scene like that, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And, like, because, like, Darlie's saying it's a random intruder, but, like, what if he had a mask on and it was Darren? It's like every Scooby-Doo episode. But, yeah, I think statistically it's more likely someone in the house did it. But I don't think there's enough hard evidence.
Yeah.
So, but
I mean, honestly, it kind of sounds like the police just fucked up a bunch. That, like, if they had done everything correctly and by the book, then it might be a much clearer case that it was her. You know, like with the evidence with the knife and the screen and, you know, all of those things. That it's like, if you had done, and the fingerprints, if you had done your job correctly, then you might not have all of these inconsistencies that could point to reasonable doubt if it was her.
Yes. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know either. Like, don't ask me to say something officially. I don't know. But that is the case. The murder of Damon and Devon Routier.
Yep. Super sad. Let us know what you guys think. Do you think it was Darlie? Do you think it was Darren? Do you think it was Tommy Linsells? Some other random intruder? It's just one of those cases that it's like, it's so hard to know for sure what happened. So definitely let us know your thoughts. Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is I got to meet the little baby of the podcast. The little baby that this podcast created. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't have anything to do with it besides moral support. No, but I got to meet sweet baby Millie, and I got to cuddle, and I got to... What was I about to say? I literally drained. Do you ever start a sentence and you just don't know where it's going?
Dude, like, things were happening. You got to get spit up on, you know.
I did. I get a little spit up on. I got to put a little passy back in her mouth when she cried, and then sometimes I wasn't enough. But it was just awesome getting to meet her, and of course see Jaclyn and Andrew and all the little dogs and kitties in the house. So,
yes, we have a very full house now. I feel like.
Yeah, you got a lot going on. A lot of different pets that rely on you to, like, go out and go to the bathroom or change their litter box, and also, like, an infant that requires you to change. Like, you got a lot of poop going on.
There's
Poops and feedings.
Yes, there's a lot of needy beings in this home.
But it was a very fun weekend and fun. Like, we went a lot of different places safely, you know, just exploring. But yeah, so that is my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
I mean, obviously, we have the same perk of the week that you got to come see me, and it was just such a fun weekend, and it was relaxing, but, like, we got to do stuff at the same time, you know? One of those where it's, like, the perfect balance of, like, oh, we just, like, sat and chilled and watched a movie, but then we also, like, went to a farmer's market and, like, went to an outdoor brewery, and, you know, that, like, perfect mix of things, and also relaxing, where you don't feel like you're, like, running the whole weekend, but you also don't feel like you were, like, stuck at home the whole weekend. And, you know, like I said, I'm just trying to get Courtney to move in, you know, so maybe one day I'll be able to convince her.
Which I was also thinking that we forgot to get our caffeinated crime stuff and take a picture with Millie in her onesie. I completely forgot. I didn't even bring my stuff with me.
I probably won't fit in my shirt yet. So
you can borrow one of mine. You can borrow one of mine. They'll definitely fit you.
Well, if Millie will not fit in it by the next time I see you, we'll just have to, we'll make it into like a little shirt, you know?
We'll make another one. We'll just
have a little crop top.
For every month.
So yeah, if you guys want to tell us about your pets, babies, your weekends with your friends, all of that fun stuff, you know the drill. You can find us on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at CAF Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod, We're on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, or you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com.
And if you feel so inclined, if you have a little extra money that you want to send our way to get some bonus content, a pin, a sticker, to come hang out with us once a month, to see Q&As, to join our Discord. We have a lot of perks going on. We're trying to make it worth your money. If you have that extra money and want to support us and want a little bit more of like an intimate experience, a little bit more direct contact to us, you can do that at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes. And we are still running our Apple reviews giveaway. So once we get to 50, we'll pick someone. You'll get a pin, a sticker, gift card to give to the coffee shop of your choice. You've heard this, I don't know, too many times. But go and review us so that we can stop saying it and we can give it to someone. Just make sure that you put some identifying information. I can't give it to someone who's ABC123. Don't know who you are.
Yes, exactly.
But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.